Hey y'all. Sorry for the slight delay there. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, quite well, thanks. Looking forward to this chat.
Hi, Abby.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Abby. How everyone?
All right. How's everyone doing? We ready for all sorts of funness? We're going to be chatting the details, the nitty-gritty of the maturity model. Just sent the link. I'll also do a screen share, but I know I like to be able to scroll around a bit sometimes, and so I want to make sure everyone has the link as well, if that is helpful to them. Cool. So I have 2 hours set aside. I appreciate that's quite a lot of time. I don't want anyone who is here for an hour to feel like they have been left in the dust and all the interesting things happen in the second hour or whatever. So I'd like to look at a ways that we can get coverage during the first hour, even if that means we go deeper in the second hour, if people still want to be around for the second hour and want to go deeper on something like that. But I don't want to, yeah, so that's kind of my goal for facilitating. But hi, Matt. I appreciate you calling out for first time hanging out for the maturity model. I was going to say that might be helpful to set a bit of stage of who's here, what made you interested in joining this call, if there's something in particular you want to dive into, because that will help us also. I know some people can't come for right at the beginning, some people might have to leave early. If they say I really care about speaking on this topic, then we can try and prioritize that and make sure that we get people speaking as they want. So I'm basically here as facilitator. That's how I view my role at this stage, is making sure that everyone gets voices heard and that we mix our ideas together to the point where we can come to push it forward. I don't think we're going to be in some final state at the end of today's call. It's more like push it one step forward, get it a bit more closely with that. So cool. Sorry, do you want to introduce yourself? I know some people will know each other, but I think we should all do intros. There's enough new faces.
Yeah, I can start. Yep. So my name is Sari Kansa. I work for a company called PlanView. We make project management software, and I'm a senior platform engineer with them. Yep, I've been kind of hovering around this working group for the past month and a half or so. It's been a lot of fun, especially this maturity model. So it's a little bit about me. I'll pass it to Matt.
Hi, thanks. I'm Matt German-Prey. I'm from the Chaos Project. We do open source community health metrics and software. I'm interested because we are actually also working with the to-do group in our OSPO context working group, as well as with university OSPOs and scientific software communities around things like maturity models, where we're setting goals and then thinking about the metrics and metrics models that we've developed in Chaos that can help kind of speak to those particular goals. So here to see what y'all have to talk about.
Awesome.
Oh, and I'll hand it over to Marsh.
Oh, you turned it over to me? Is that what you just said? Okay.
I turned it over to Marsh, but whomever.
Can you share a link, Matt, to that Chaos project? I'm curious.
Yeah, you bet. We are a Linux Foundation project, so share it here.
Hi, I'm Marsh. I'm a product manager at Google. I started working on Apogee doing API management in 2009. Oh my God, a long time ago. And as DevOps is morphed into platform engineering, how that intersects with API management is a really interesting question. And so there are two things that I'm curious about in particular. One is, what is that role that API management plays in platform engineering? And two, both API management and platforms are really about understanding what it means to have a product mindset. And to me, that is, what are you doing? You're trying to create the space for people to fill, right? You can't force growth. You can't force people to think. All you can do is create the situation where they can do those things. And that's the part of the maturity model that I want to make sure comes through. Is how do we make people understand that while this may focus on sort of the technical things you can control, what are the things you also need to be considering as the context for success? Who did I pass you? Siam. I hope I said your name right. Sorry. SAIM. Yeah.
Oh,
Looking for the mute button. Yeah, cool.
Oh, thank you very much. So I am Saim. I'm actually a parallels open source project. I am maintaining. I'm one of the co-founder of this project. So parallels is actually aim at solving the Kubernetes RBAC challenges. So basically, we want, and we're working with our customers in the company I'm working in is Rafi Kubernetes operation platform. And we've been working with a lot of our customers, and we have one of the feature in our main platform that has access management. And recently, we actually denoted last year the CNCF as a sandbox project. So I'm spending a lot of the time on the open source things. I'm also a CNCF ambassador. I'm also doing podcasts to taming the complexity of platform engineering in general and finding easy ways to actually define other people's for the naive people to understand what the platform engineering is all about. And this is one of my actually craze right now, the platform engineering platform working group. And one of the things I'm actually really excited that Abby is taking the initiative for the platform maturity model. I think it's really, really important as for the as this moment of now. And we're talking to a lot of the enterprise and the customer. I think they see a lot of the pain currently when adopting technologies in particular. And there is so much in the CNCF landscape. And if we can give them a golden path or something that can help them gain visibility and an easier process to solve, I think this our job going to be a lot more easier. So I'm looking forward to, I think next person might be the Josh. I can forward to the Josh.
Sure. My name is Josh Gavant. I lead Ouija platforms. I think I've met most of you. I work for Red Hat, really passionate about helping end users make the most of cloud. So yeah, I'm excited to learn. I feel like these conversations, the ones we had like these around the top level paper I learned a lot from them, and it's impacted me to this day, some of my thinking. So looking forward to the thoughts here.
I think we just Robert. I don't know if there's a short intro you've got on what you're hoping for today and who you are.
Short intro is always hard. Well, my name is Robert. I'm one of the chairs of the platforms working group. I am a CNCF ambassador, and a Microsoft MVP for Azure, and a Azure Corporate ambassador, and I do way too much stuff. And and for this, I'm just following everyone else's lead on this one. But I think it's turning out really great. So I just wanted to be here to make sure that continues. I'm not in any way, shape, or form in doubt that it will not be doing that, but I just want to be part of this. So that's why I'm here now.
Cool. John, I saw you throw on your camera, say a quick hello. I appreciate that. How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you? So John Gardner, here from Crumware. I was told I might be interested in this, so came to check it out. Mostly here to observe and learn. I am a senior applications engineer and at Crumware, and I've done some open source work in the past. I'm not currently on any particular project, but I worked a lot with CanJS at a previous job that I had. If anybody has heard of that, and yeah. Here to excited to be here.
Cool. Please do share opinions. A lot of this is just about what people have seen in their history, right? And how that might affect around. So please don't, you're more than welcome to be more in listen mode, but also don't feel like you have to be an expert on what we've been doing so far to still have an impact on the conversation today. And that's true for everybody in the room, right? So
Roger.
Yeah. And Victor, don't know if you're in listen mode or intro mode.
I can enter. Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm a Victor Liu. I'm independent. Was a physicist before, and this is interesting. That's why I'm here. Trying to learn landscape and history and evolvement of the architectures and abstractions of the concepts. Thanks.
Awesome. Cool. So with that, as I said, so I didn't really introduce myself. I work at a startup called Syntasso, working on platform engineering things. So I'm on the product side now, vendor product side. I've been a platform engineer up until about a year ago when I started this for 5 or 6 years. And before that, sort of in developer experience stuff from a testing point of view for many years. So sort of this is the stuff I enjoy, the internal stuff. And I just have started to join both Robert and Josh. They've been kind enough to help me join them as the leads with the working group. So that's why my role here is facilitator. So yes, like I'm helping guide things in some ways. You may hear me do things, but the biggest, most important part of my job is making sure everyone has a chance to review and input to stuff. So if you ever feel like that is not happening, A, please tell me. But B, if you don't feel comfortable telling me, tell Josh or Robert, and they can help make sure that the voices get heard as need be. So that's definitely our goal. So to intro, just a quick recap. At the top of this document, we've got a contributor guide. It's all about, please, let's contribute. Everybody has should have comment and whatever the suggesting mode options, so they can make suggestions to updates if they see a better way of saying something or want to add something. The biggest thing that's hidden in here that you may not know from this tell from the surface is that this is a fairly high level document still. So this is something that we want to be targeting kind of more architects, directors sort of levels. Yes, of course, individual engineers can read and get benefit from this, but we don't want to dive into the weeds. And for that, there's not going to be any comment as to like specific projects. So that's one thing where I will like be a bit more strong in the leadership is saying, no, we won't do that. We will not add in a any reference to any projects, CNCF or otherwise. Yeah, that's just not in the scope of this paper. We have lots of exciting projects that we're planning on doing that will explore potential projects that can help lead to these outcomes. And so if that's something you want to do, definitely reach out. We can find something that will scratch that itch for you, but unfortunately that won't be this paper. So that's sort of that. And then I've been talking about our paper, this maturity model, is having sort of 3 sections. Sort of this intro section, which is like the paragraphs, and I'll talk about that for a second. Then we have this like screenshotter section. So this is like the table, where we want things to be short and snappy and like screenshotable for like conference talks, papers, point at this kind of thing. We explicitly want this to be short and snappy. That doesn't, but short and snappy will also explicitly mean people will have further questions. And we expect that will be able to get answered by the more detailed paragraphs. We've gotten lots of really good feedback on the table and in the paragraph section as well. We've sort of let the paragraph section at this stage wither a bit. Reason being that if we don't have the relationship that each of these aspects have to each other and how people might grow through them kind of solidified and confident within the group, then adding lots of paragraphs of detail around them is likely to require a lot of refactoring and changing as we improve the relationships that we have. So these paragraphs are likely to be out of date from what you see up in the table, and that's okay. They really just give an idea of where we could go with details. And we will definitely dive into that once we get a little bit more confidence in the model itself, the table version. That makes sense. So today's focus is really around this table. This table is the guts of the model. If we get it right on how we have relationships, how we define the different aspects of the model, meaning the things down the side here, and we get right how we progress the evaluation and the maturity of someone across those, we can do a lot of damage and improvement of giving examples of this through more detailed writing. So this is really the guts of what we want to try and get right today, or get further along today. Any of that sound surprising? Any of that? Anybody want to question or challenge? Cool. All right. So with that in mind, I had said that I want to sort of put like a timer so that we go for breadth over depth, at least in this first hour, so that we can figure out where hotspots are, right? So if there's like something that is absolutely we cannot talk through in kind of 7 or 8 minutes, like that's a good thing to know, and we can make a decision at that point. Do we go deeper, or do we try and figure out if there's another hotspot we need to worry about or not throughout the model? So with that in mind, I'm going to set a timer, and I'm very sorry if I cut you off today, but I'm going to try and facilitate and make sure people can all speak. And so please don't be offended if I suggest someone who's got their hand raised or something else to that effect. Like it's just trying to get the conversation going. So with that in mind, the first row is currently called investment. There is discussion around whether or not this could or should be called budget. And I think there was another original naming of it that was funding. So the general gist of this first aspect is how things get paid for. I'm gonna try not to use any of those words so that I don't try and lean people's opinions. How do things get paid for? And paid for means both time and money. And that has always been the intention behind this row, though it's not always been clear with the wording. So take it away. How do people feel about that being an aspect of platform maturity at all? And how do they feel about the naming of convention of it and the levels that are currently listed?
One thing you said at the end, Abby, you said a lot about how it gets paid for, and then at the end you said time and money. That was my thinking is I think, yeah, I guess what's people's thoughts? I think we're reflecting here more than money, like you said with time. Here we're saying human resources. Although, even looking at it, it's almost like it's not just human resources as you look like designated engineer platform team. It's more like how it's structured. Does that even go here? Maybe that's a separate category.
I think that is one of the later categories that kind of ties into that. I like the wording investment because it kind of makes sense from the perspective of both like monetary and just people. You can throw a bunch of money on it but not necessarily invest a lot of people in it, and then it probably won't get anywhere, and vice versa. So I like the wording investment, at least. Kind of makes sense.
I think that's a really interesting observation, Robert. And I don't think that's currently showcased in the levels. Where this is, I think it's been asked before, a conversation of like, are we talking about build versus buy? And my first reaction to that question was like, you should be able to be mature whether you're building or buying, because it's your context on whether or not you can buy the things and have the outcomes that you need, or you have to custom build, or you want to custom build. But like, something about how you put that, it like, I don't know, made me interested on like, should we be building in something into these 4 levels a bit differently?
I think it's somewhat in there. Like the first having voluntary contributors. That means someone is not taken off like whatever is the primary thing that you're supposed to do and get dedicated to doing platforms. So you're kind of working after hours. But it could be more present in actually I think it's the devils have more or less what it needs when it comes to that. Yeah, I think it makes sense if you can say investment as in money and time. Having designated platform engineering team, the designated product manager, that's a new level on top of that again, etc. So I think it makes sense as it is. I'm not sure if anyone else disagrees or.
So can I get a little bit of clarification on the wording of the designated platform engineering team? Because so at previous jobs, we didn't have a designated team necessarily, but basically in between any client work, we were just expected to pick up and work on our platform. Is that kind of synonymous with what you mean there?
I think that would be basically the first level of voluntary contributors. Like if you have time, feel free to work on the platform. If you are dedicated to creating the platform, you have a team designated for that and the set of time to specifically do that.
I see. These were actually like during paid hours though, and there were times when we were given that as like our project to work on. So I think it's kind of the same thing as level 2, but just more dynamic. So basically people rotating in and out, it was more dynamic.
Yes. Yeah, and I like the update that got in temporary contributors. So the way that I see it, if you depending on your company, you could be somewhere where you have 2 mindsets. I am a principal cloud engineer and I work against customers, but I'm also kind of the lead on the platforms internally. So I'm split between 2 different roles. But the fact is that we have a dedicated team for it, and we dedicate time for it. We're not just like picking up whenever there's when there's available time or set off temporarily time for it. We have specific time set off. I think that is kind of the difference between level 1 and 2, if you want. But obviously you can land in between in some aspects, I think.
Yeah. I'm making a couple of edits and so like call me if they aren't capturing what you're trying to say. Like, and I say that to like everyone in the room. It sounds to me like saying that the team has to be called the platform engineering team, like take that away. Why is that? That doesn't need to be in there. So like, but it's about that dedicated humans who will have who understand they have long-term investment to think deeply about it, more than just solving the current problem, but like solving the kind of, that's why I added R&D. So that was just to be clear. And like R&D might still be a word that we want to do better, but like that idea that there's a difference between like, I have a project I have been told I must solve. There is a problem, solve problem. And I have a thing that I am trying to like usher forward. But sorry, I think I cut you off there.
No, you're good. You kind of hit a lot of what I was going to say there. I think I'm reading team topologies right now, and a lot of what they emphasize is the importance of like someone needs to own the project, which I think that's a level of maturity when there's ownership, and it's not just like someone somewhere when they're free is going to work on this. It's like specifically these people are going to own it. This is what it's actually going to look like to own this platform. This is what it's actually going to look like to kind of push it forward. So I think there's like a level of intentionality that kind of comes with that designation. I think the phrasing designated full-time people probably could be phrased different, because that can be taken a lot of ways. Like what is full-time? Like what exactly? I think kind of what it sounds like you're trying to get at is like there's some intentionality with this. There's people that are sets and they're going to push this product, this platform forward.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at with the full-time people as well. Like whenever, so it wasn't just our free time and what I was thinking of. It was more like, okay, like in between this client work, we want you to actually do this feature, and you are full-time on that feature until you get that integrated into the platform, right? One thing that I mentioned as far as just wording is concerned is maybe like a well-defined roadmap could be put into there somehow.
Yeah, and that's down in the roadmaps and backlog.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry about
that. It's a great point, and that's where it's interesting to try and like balance the aspects and keep them independent enough. Like there's definitely going to be this munging of things where like, but that's why I feel like what we're doing right now with a little bit of the wordsmithing is trying to separate those a bit better, right? So like I started with like annual something, and I'm like, oh no, it's more about your horizon, right? And like that includes, there's going to be a lot of wordsmithing that needs to be done. The idea is, are we on the same page of like what we're trying to achieve within each box, and do we have enough pointers that we can like wordsmith the box accordingly? I am at time, and I'm rolling with the punches here on how to facilitate this. So I want to ask your all's opinion. That was 8 minutes. We will not get through every aspect if we do 8 minutes for all of them, let alone more. How do people feel if we take a Roman vote right now on this aspect? Are people comfortable that the aspect is give or take where they expect the aspect to be and they'd like to move on? That's a thumbs up. not that this is the final model that we're going to publish. Thumbs down means that there are fundamental concerns with this aspect and that we should stop and spend a few minutes on it. All right, so yeah, Roman vote or like on the screen, that's fine. So the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, so a little bit more, there's still some questions being upheld for this aspect. Marsh, is there something, can you share what your concern is so that we can?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the comment from a little bit earlier, whether this considers the organizational structure. I think it does. To me, this line is about creating space in the organization for this to exist. And I think if I understood down below, I think the alternative would be the technical team topology, maybe. And that to me is about the relationship to other teams. That's how I think about it in my head.
I would agree with you, but I think it's that's kind of what it's spelled out to be in the levels, I feel, because it's because you're starting off by having no investment directly or little to no investment into the platform to dedicating and investing in the platform, which is people or money, depending. And then you have a more mature team, and then you have basically a platform like full on.
Yep, I agree with that. And it gets to another point I wanted to make, which I think I might have put in a comment somewhere, maybe it was in the chat. But like to me, phases, or what are we calling these? Different levels. Levels 1 and 3 feel transitional to me. Like they are not steady states. Their whole point of those is to get from 1 to 2, and then I think there's a big leap to get from 2 to 3. Because I think you'll face organizational challenges in making that jump. And so that, it feels like gathering strength in order to make that leap. That's how I feel it, but I don't know how we capture that, or even if others agree or disagree.
I think that's a cool observation, that in the detail at the bottom, like we could even talk about the transition. Like right now we talk about 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, but there's a transition from 1 to 2 and a 2 to 3 that we could touch on also.
Yeah. And so then 2 becomes in part like what are you going to need to do in order to make that leap? And so anyway, that's not specific about this grid, so I'm happy to now turn my thumbs down to thumbs up. But that's the point I wanted to make before we left it.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
We've got an interesting one, or I was in a call yesterday. We're helping a client do this transition right now, and they're about at 2, and they're transitioning to 3 in that phase, and it's interesting because they make comments like IT already does this thing, app dev does this other thing. They've got people doing this stuff, but they just don't have people that have been defined as like, you're the platform team now, and what that looks like. It's really interesting. It's like they have all of the ingredients, and that kind of puts them at 2, but they just haven't activated it officially. It's hard to say.
But that's a really interesting point, because I think looking for examples that contradict what we're claiming is a good way of testing this too. And that's one of those. Do they need that dedicated team? I think is we haven't seen them make the leap. We don't know.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of proves the point of going from less to more mature. The idea of and this is what we did. Like we had no role, everyone's role-less, and basically just do whatever you want type thing. And it's like, oh, we're going to create platforms and we're going to create these services, but no one's dedicated to that, which then turns out to people just taking random stuff and it doesn't progress. And then I go like, no, we need to have a dedicated platform team that creates these platform stuff. And as soon as that, I said that and took a little bit of charge of it, things starting like actually moving somewhere. So it's kind of obvious, and I've been saying this as like a consultant for many years, it's obvious that having a dedicated team for this makes sense. You don't progress fast. You might progress, but you will not progress fast and efficiently, which again kind of leads up to the maturity bubble. The further along the scale you are, the more mature you are. So again, it's word smithing and just like trying to get it concise and to make sense between the levels. But I think as a starting point, the levels here make sense. Like we're in the ballpark if nothing else, on the different levels. And referencing back to when we created the GitOps principles, there's only 4 principles, and we had 5-6 meetings per principle just to get the wording correct. Like, we knew what the principle was, like principle 1, this is principle 1, but then we needed to get the wording correctly, so there could be no doubt that this is the principle and that it means what we feel it meant.
And
I
that's why
think this is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, that's why they say this is not about finalizing the table. It's about moving ourselves closer to feeling like we know what the principle is, even if we can't get down to the one word. And that's where, like Matt was asking, like, oh, can these also have one word? And it's like, yes, that is the definite intention of all these boxes, but that doesn't mean we're there yet for all of them, right? For some of them, we're still sort of aligning on it. So based on listening to this, I've made a suggestion, and I wanted to make a suggestion before I just went and did this one level further. Feels to me like level 1 is about that voluntary, temporary, and inconsistent contribution, whether that be time, money, otherwise. Level 2 is about that consistency, but that could be a consistency of a project manager managing outsourced purchased platforms. It could be consistency of platform engineering teams building something that are engineers based, but it's about that consistency. Versus when we get to 3, it's about that holistic consistency, that like dedicated roles that cover both technical and non-technical sides of things. So what I would suggest that we do is we delete this second bullet from 2, because that's basically been moved up to like, if there's an annual horizon, you have people like, you have someone, even if it's just a project manager managing your beach of consultants, right? You have somebody who is doing an annual horizon on what's going on and not just a project-based horizon. So remove that, and then we talk about the dedicated roles and the fact that that's like a holistic, well-rounded set of roles in level 3 before we start talking about the fact that this is something that you have to like, and I know emergence of metrics, like that's a separate conversation I'd like to push off for right now, if that's okay, because I think it's a really good one, but I'd like to move on to another aspect. Yeah, so yeah, that was sort of there. I think I captured here, Marsh, this idea of like, what is this to do with the org and making space for this, and that comment you made right at the beginning, because I think that that's the thing that's worth not the thing, but a thing that's worth chewing on, that you said, that I think that we aren't going to come to a great conclusion on very, very quickly, but it's like, yeah, I want that present and captured, because I think it was an interesting thing to track. All right, I'm going to push us. I'm a terrible timekeeper. I'm going to push us into the next one, which is adoption, advocacy, and marketing. And again, these are all like suggested words. We have to wordsmith down to something capturable, but that doesn't mean we're there yet. This section is all about the fact that there are that platforms are about users and consumers of offerings and services by the platform, and how does that relationship get nurtured or get handled and managed, and how do you encourage adoption or make sure you have users, right? Is this like, is this carrot, is this stick, is this anything in between? So that's sort of the like high level topic, but there's lots of room for discussion around how we phrase that and how we level that. So who's got questions or ideas?
Just a quick question for clarity. I'm confused by the purple and so like, yeah, what is this? This is just like I guess the suggestion is adoption, comma, advocacy and marketing, or we're just trying to figure out, I'm just trying to see kind of where, do we have like, I guess a row title that we want to use, or are we still trying to figure that part out?
Josh, my understanding is that was like, in lieu of adoption, we could do advocacy and marketing as like a single combination, or is that like, it could be adoption, it could be advocacy, it could be marketing, like that?
Yeah. I just put some suggestions out there, and I'd put them in this area so that, we could debate them like we are. I don't know. Advocacy is a term that I hear a lot in technology companies for, marketing essentially products. So that's why I put it there.
Cool. Cool. So I just trying to like consistently have if there's a question mark, it's like, I don't know, one of these things. Hopefully, maybe we can remove some of these as options today if we feel like they're not good fits. But that's where we stand today. Yeah.
Like the question itself, what compels users? I know that I'd actually, what attracts users, I'd mentioned that, but like, how do you bring users to your platform? Like, that's the primitive we're kind of going for here. And I guess like advocacy, marketing, adoption, and there's a little difference. Adoption could be like, are they using it? I guess like just raw numbers, and advocacy could be like, how do you market it? How do you inform them? It's almost two different motions. The advocacy informs them, like in marketing and a product, like it informs the market, hey, we're here, we have a great product for you. And then adoption is, okay, are they, measuring, are they actually using it? There's maybe two aspects of the same thing, but maybe not. So yeah, I'll pause there.
It is a little bit difficult with these words because they kind of overlap in some aspects depending on your outlook. I feel that advocacy is something you actively do, not something that's measurable. So I don't think that should be the name. While adoption would be more fitting, marketing is also something that you do. I like the added growth, but it's kind of not directly clear. So I would say adoption makes sense. Like, Marshall.
Yeah, I mean, and added growth because I think it does capture both marketing and advocacy. And all this does, it is about, how are you growing your user base, right? In the beginning, you're showing people and trying to, I think in level 1, you're trying to understand what people would need, right? There's a lot of learning that's happening there as you're trying to understand the kinds of returns on the investment you could get to. And then I think, you've sort of, you're trying to establish whether you have a kind of product market fit internally. Like, are you seeing the results that you expected? And I think then the leap becomes, now when you're actively trying to drive growth with internal resources, that feels like a new level in 3. And the last one would just be established, right? It's the obvious best way to work in your company.
And I think it's
sorry, continue.
I was just say, I just think the established best way to work in your company, I think we're saying the same thing, but just to double check, it's that your internal offering is so so appealing and so aligned with the requirements of the company that everybody is like, why the heck would I go anywhere else? It's not that
it's so obvious. It's so obvious. Like, why would you fight the current? It would be absurd. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I just wonder, like, that's the one thing of like making sure it's, because it's a big deal is like, it can also erode, right? Like, 'cause you could have a product that was fantastic. Like, there's tons of freaking Slack and its new removal of the thread sidebar. Like, great products go sideways, and like that is a part of internal products as well, right? Like, you are used to using things and it turns out they go a way that doesn't align with the company anymore. And you can actually drop almost in maturity in some ways.
And sometimes that's necessary to achieve new growth, right? But yeah, you're right. That's a different kind of problem. If you get to the place where you have to fall back in order to go, anyway, who knows? We can talk about that for hours. I'm gonna stop.
Added a synonym, embracement, which is similar to adoption. I agree, adoption seems to be better. Embracement probably similar.
I'm sorry, what was the second option? Advertisement?
Embracement.
Embracement. Now you're making me spell live that, Victor. We're gonna have a conversation about that.
So it's a very prominent word.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, all I was gonna say was that I think kind of go back to the growth concepts. I think you hit it kind of around the nose, Abby, where I don't think growth should be the goal. I think it's really figuring out how do we elevate, right, the larger organization's goal. Like, ultimately, that's the purpose, right? They want to make more money or whatever it is, right? So the platform should align to that purpose, whatever that being. And that could be like, the platform could just be like, man, this specific group of people, and it could be a small group of people, building a platform for them could absolutely like be the most important thing that could help to elevate or raise up the company's goal. And so it doesn't necessarily connotate like growth in the traditional sense, but really having like an impact to help achieve those goals by abstracting whatever. So yeah, this is what I was thinking.
Yeah, I kind of thinking that too, like growth makes you think of like economic growth, and the company has to always be making more money, and it's not quite about that here. It's about right sizing and providing the right thing. I was
So
gonna add that I'd mentioned the advocacy one. Now looking closely, like I like how the last category is platform advocacy. So it's almost like that's a stage in your adoption journey. Later you can have active advocates instead of just hoping people pick it up. So +1 to
I
Right.
find that that's not uncommon, that a section starts with a certain name, then it turns out that actually that name is really a stage, and like trying to generalize the thing that's happened a few times. I'll put it that way. Platform is a product, like product was like a name where backlog and roadmap is for a while, and it's like, well, but that's actually a stage, possibly, maybe not, maybe we want to undo that, but it's a conversation I think that comes up quite a lot. So I probably sullied your idea of growth, Marsh, by adding the word user in front of it, because like that idea of like this is about the end users, like more so, and that maybe takes us away from that idea of like the economic growth that Josh is talking about, like or away from the like the thought that might be what we're talking about, when that's, I don't think, our focus here. But I also have since added driver to use, which is a terrible phrase, and we could definitely wordsmith that better. But I'm hearing what people are saying, and it feels like it's like that is the best yet of what I'm hearing everyone saying, and what, like, to capture it, even if it's a terrible header. Is that fit with people? Like,
So just like, I think it made me wonder, like, is it about user growth? What other growth is there? Like, I think as you get towards levels 3 and 4, you're like, what is the total time it takes to have a successful deployment or to troubleshoot an issue? Like, there are other metrics you might be looking at. So you have your addressable market once you're fully realized as in level 4, I think is pretty small. It's razor thin. Like, if people aren't using it, why is that, right? And so what does growth mean at that point?
Yeah, one thing that I've been thinking about a little bit around the level 3 is I'm kind of looking at it from even like an open source project standpoint. At what point do people start to actively seek out the platform, like actively seek using it and leveraging it, and even turn into more of a contributor level relationship or a contributor form of consumption, if that makes sense? I feel like there's a lot of parallels there, but I'm not entirely sure how to, I didn't know if that was like 3 or 4, right? Like at 4, are there teams actively contributing, but then the platform team becomes more of a facilitator versus doing the active boots on ground development. Who knows? I just was playing with the thought in my head.
so, yes, we can. So we've hit the timer. Are there any words people want to take off of this list based on conversations?
There's one, like, I think, like, if you look at the first words, like adoption, embracement, advocacy, and marketing, the word marketing is look like a difficult here to tell people what do we actually mean by marketing. Is it the marketing means selling the product, or it's the marketing mean for, because there is the same word, like advocacy and evangelism is used interchangeably. And sometimes advocacy, if you talk to a lot of some of the community members, do feel advocacy mean influence without authority. Like you telling people this is the right person, but I am not the one is actually making the decision. It's your job is to actually, based on my knowledge, to understand, is it relevant for the needs? So
I think
advocacy,
Josh said a similar point, I think, which is that like both marketing and advocacy are almost like activities in comparison to the other words on that list, which are more like descriptors, maybe. I don't know. I'm wondering if for the same reasons, Siam, that you're saying marketing isn't quite a right fit. Josh, you mentioned advocacy as like it still jives, but maybe not as the header for the row. And I'm wondering if those two don't make sense as the headers for the row, even if, like, as I say, advocacy is sitting there at level 4 right now. And like, should I remove these is basically what I guess I'm asking.
Yes,
I
so
would
I'm
say,
fine with removing them. Yeah. If you're
Getting
asking
a
me,
bunch of
I think I
nods.
put them in, but
Cool. And like, but it's cool. Like, I feel like the conversation was interesting there, right? So I'm glad you added them, because it's about like, okay, what's the tone we want to take with this? Is it about the activities you're doing, or is it about the like thing you can measure, right? That's actually what each of these aspects should be, something you can measure, because the whole point is we're measuring it at different levels. And like, are we measuring their marketing? No, we're measuring their user growth or their adoption or their like something else that's there. And I'm not saying we've selected one yet, but we're gonna do the thumbs up, thumbs down
term?
again. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, what's the term in the product world for adoption of your product? Is it adoption? Like if I'm selling cars, a new kind of car, Teslas, let's say Teslas are building the market. What do they say? How much have they been bought, purchased? I don't know, just throwing
Yeah.
that out.
they use, cell numbers and stuff like that. I think adoption is the only one that's kind of right here, because it is about adoption. It's about how you get adoption.
But is it about adopting a platform or adopting the idea of having a platform?
The platform, I think, adopting the internal
Yeah.
offerings, whether that be a set of wikis, or whether that be a purchased offering, or whether that be a homegrown
you
solution.
wouldn't have been started the maturity rate at all unless you actually are already in agreement that there should be platform stuff. I feel that I think it's about the platform.
I'm comfortable leaving those all there for us to stew on them. I don't feel like we have to get down to one word today. So, but I feel like we successfully removed a few because we've talked about the idea. I want to do the same thing, thumbs up, thumbs down. And really what I'm looking for here actually is, I can save you all the thumbs up if you want. What I'm looking for is similar to, I thought Marsh did a really good example of why it was useful to ask this question on the last section. If there is something you feel like you're uncomfortable with, the direction of travel for this aspect, I'd love for you to share that now. Even if we don't solve your uncomfortable feeling today, it gives us something to think about. So I'm going to leave a bit of space. If anyone is uncomfortable with anything on the direction of travel for this aspect, please share now. This would be the right time. Cool. All right. Doesn't mean you can never again disagree. It just means that that's good. We're on the right direction of travel. All right. We've got 10 minutes left. I am going to keep going down the list, but the next time we do this, we're going to start from the bottom and go up. So we don't just always talk about the same ones, but we're going from the top of the list today. That's what we'll keep doing. And I say 10 minutes left in that, like, if you had a 1 hour block, I will be here for 2 hours for anyone who would like to be, but I know some people have kind of 1 hour blocks. So the next one is around user experience and documentation. The big thing about this that I'm not sure is well captured in all the words, so I want to talk about the intention, is around like the I guess I'm going to use the term user experience, which is terrible. It doesn't mean it's the right name for the section, but it's about that clarity of the offering and how it actually addresses the needs of the users, right? And so this is the first situation we're running into where the maturity in the row that we were just talking about and the maturity in this row have overlap, but are not actually dependent on each other. If you make adoption mandatory, but the thing you're making is tailored to the experience that those users have to go through as a part of like working internally, you could be quite mature in the experience and be potentially immature in the adoption or the embracement or the user growth or the driver to use, right? So they are intended to be decoupled, but we might find that they're more coupled than we want them to be. So that's a good thing to suss out. but it's that idea of like how much cognitive load as a user of this internal offering, set of internal offerings, am I taking on? Is I guess maybe the way I would summarize it. But try me, because I think that it's tough. So please, who's uncomfortable with this or has questions or ideas with this row?
I read this as interface. What is the style of interface that your platform provides? That's why I added the word documentation, because I think that's part of the interface, I guess. I'm not saying that should be the word. I think a lot of people use the word user experience to mean interface, so it kind of fits. And that, like, to me, it's whether it's like you just said, I liked how you just said it, whether it's adopted or not, is this platform, a ServiceNow system where you insert a ticket and somebody calls you in a few hours? Is it, self-service? Does it have golden path templates? That all, to me, that's like an ultimate form of self-service. So like, what is the interface? How do they interact?
So one thing that's a little ambiguous to me is the level 3 and level 4, and kind of the that seems like a little bit blurred to me there, and kind of the definition of a programmatic API and golden path templates. So there, to me, what that seems like it would be is more like, I don't know, being able to pull something from like npm JS or whatever, and then potentially like up to having like a full like CLI tool to walk you through like the setup of the platform and to ask questions and set it up that way. Am I kind of on base there, or is that? And also as far as user experience and like the title of it, kind of like onboarding is what I'm getting out of this, right? Like how easy is it to like use this, like pull this into, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I realized as I was trying to describe the intention, my understanding of the intention of this row, is that there are two things being muddled here. So one thing that's being muddled here is the experience, and that includes what your onboarding into the experience is, what your documentation of the experience is, what your interface to the experience is, and so forth. But the other thing that I used the term, the last thing I said, was around the cognitive load. And that is also being muddled in here, because that difference between something that like is a manual request queue is a terrible user experience because you have no control over the timing, but it's a fantastic cognitive load. Like, go do it for me, thank you. Versus like all of a sudden you move up to like off the shelf offerings, and this is great because now you can like get access to things when you want them, but like, man, now I have to know everything. And so I'm noticing these two muddlings, and I'm wondering if those need to be teased apart. But with that, Marsh.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to pick this up right after talking about adoption and user growth, because to me, growth is often in products, considering what is friction you could remove to facilitate adoption. And so there's an interesting intertwining, and we're gonna, I think, find this all over the place where these rows play off each other. But I wonder if it's a way to think about, it's a kind of engagement in that, sort of fits into that option. I'm gonna, just because I have the floor, I'm gonna steal one more thought, which is that, I was again thinking about how I might label the levels 1 to 4. And for example, not saying we adopt this necessarily, but thinking about these levels as proving, learning, growing, sustaining, just as an example. Then each of these rows, what would be examples of those qualities in each cell? That, I think, is a good way to sort of test whether we've got it nailed down, or whether there might be a problem. Does that make sense? I found myself approaching it that way with the previous ones, like, what would it mean to be in this box? Like, how do I consider it? And then if we have those labels, we could apply it more directly. But I don't want to box this in either.
Whether or not we name the columns is like definitely going to need its own conversation. I think that's one, and that's why I wanted to add that to the list, the growing list of options if we were to choose to name. And so, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Robert, I'm not trying to steal the floor. What's up? You're next.
Well, first of all, I think that user experience makes sense because it's not about a particular task. It's about the entirety of the user experience. So whether that is adopting the platform or using the platform or getting benefits out of it, for me, that's all about user experience. So I think that makes sense as a title. I would also kind of I feel that the levels are a little bit off. For in my mind, golden path templates is a lesser maturity than having curated offerings or whatever you want to call it. So if you are distributing templates and that's how you do your things, that's still a manual process. If you're offering a full-on solution through API, a portal, a whatever, that is a more mature way of doing it, in my mind. I, think of it as if the cloud, the big cloud platform vendors that here's some text, please update it and then press apply, versus you go into a portal and you say, I want one more of this thing. For me, that is the top maturity level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I think. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
So I put in chat kind of like my quick thoughts about this as far as like kind of the 4 different levels for discussion. And yeah, it kind of goes into that as well. Like basically, well, you can see them in the chat, but that's kind of where I've seen it at in the past.
I'm starting to come on board, I think, with that idea, like that what we were really trying to tackle here is the cognitive load. And like obviously like there's going to be discussions around what the 4 levels are exactly, but like the user experience is a combination of the desire for people to want to use your thing and the quality of which it improves your life. Like, or like that it's easy for you to like, and so user experience is like an outcome of mature aspect number 2. So I don't want to like put a thumb on the scale on the number there, the name there, but like the previous a combination of the previous aspect and the current aspect, because it's like that combines to have a user experience that is what you want. Like, I don't know.
And I would, if you like put into like an example, if you tell your front-end developers who manage to get something into a container that you need to use this templated YAML solution to get your stuff out, versus go, through an API or through a portal, just, point the thing in the right direction and it will go. That is going to be the better solution for them. And then obviously we are different kinds of developers and different kinds of like IT professionals. Some prefer to do stuff in a certain fashion, but I just feel that it's a bicycle versus a car. The car is going to be the more mature travel option than a bicycle, but someone might prefer to bike.
Unless you're in downtown London or downtown, I should say downtown Amsterdam. Like,
yeah, well.
All right, so we just hit 8 minutes. And again, I realize that we never have enough time for any of these. Just so you all realize, I'm just as like heartbroken of these. But it's worth a check-in that the thing we want to try and achieve is, are we on the right like direction of travel, right? And we will need to pick words, and there will be an edit made to this document at some point in the future where we pick words, and then we can worry about the words. But like, how do people feel about the direction of travel? Do people feel like there's things that they want to raise right now on this row where they're like, I'm uncomfortable that we're going to tackle this in a way that feels fit for the document?
I have one thing that is, and because I added the last row, so I'm going to take responsibility for it. And it's very similar to the discussions we're having here. And so maybe, I just got to bring it up. Maybe it should be dropped, or maybe, we should, take some ideas and integrate it into there. The idea is like, the idea here is, as you're coming to the platform, how easy is it for you to use whatever the platform offers to actually get your work done? Like, is it a click button and my database is in there, my secrets are in there, I don't even think about it? Or is it, the other extreme, is it a doc that says, do these 25 steps and then you're ready to go? So yeah, just wanted to call that out. Maybe that bottom row is actually part of this row.
I like that you said it integrates into, but yes. the integration. And I think again, when it comes to not to go over time, but of course I am.
I'm borrowing the time for the last row.
Welcome
so
to
we
the
can extra
group.
2 minutes.
but it's just like exactly the what you said now is kind of why the levels for me sounds wrong. Because you start off by these are the steps, or do you start off by sending an email to someone and they do it? That's not great. That takes whatever time. Then you have, this is a document that says these are the steps you're supposed to take, and then you have to do it. And then you go to, these are the steps, but most of it is just basically in this template, and you just like put in your stuff and it happens. And then you get to the, it's automatic, period. So that also kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'm more and more feeling like, Josh, I appreciate you pulling that in. And I think that your desire to put in that last row speaks to the fact that this row is trying to tackle two different things. And I think that like cognitive load and experience are two different things, and whether or not those need to be split, because like, as I said, like my canonical example right now of this is like a request queue is low cognitive load, but huge annoyance. And like documentation is potentially high cognitive load because you have to like learn how to use the documentation, but like at least it's self-service. And that's like actually fairly mature when it comes to like how autonomous your team is. So like, I think that there's possibly some like things that need to be talked about in there, need to be tackled in there.
I think cognitive load management is good, but it's 3-word. But
Yeah.
replacing that can be streamlining workload. So streamlining.
As like another such a long word.
Streamlining is synonym to managing cognitive workload, making it smooth.
Yeah. I would say if we're adding words or potential titles that we want to go through, I would remove cognitive load management for using just streamlining, because I agree that makes sense as a word in this category. That doesn't mean it's the final word that it should be, but I think it's at least a step in the right direction.
So what I'll do is edit this. So basically just swap the two, the two comments.
Yes, and also Abby, like I think like when you talk about user experience, sometime it's actually is a bigger umbrella for the interface. Meaning if the interface is a subset, then user experience is a superset of these things. So user experience actually sometime encapsulate interfaces. And when we're talking about interfaces, then might be there's a problem, because people think like we're talking about add-ons or like third-party tooling. Is it we're talking about this thing in the third-party tooling? That interface kind to be a good word, but if you actually like, if not actually this is a case, then might be the interoperability is another good word to add here.
Interoperability. So what I was actually going to add when I thought you were going with that, and I may have misunderstood, is like, we need to remove this as a focus on third parties, or as a possible focus on third parties. May need to like talk about the consistency of solution internally, like that there's this like the interface. We're not talking about how well Terraform is documented if you use Terraform or whatever. We're talking about how the people in your organization manage their resources across all the different tools you probably use, including your CI/CD automation, your infrastructure as code automation, your whatever, and like that's your interface to your necessary tools to do your job, necessary capabilities to do your job. Was that, I saw a bit of nodding, but also I don't think I fully captured what you were saying. So
Yes, I think like for interface, like when I'm talking about it, because this is used in a lot of the other articles in the CNCF publishing interface. If you look at the other article is read, when you talk about what actually people and the reader actually compelling to, we actually really actually heard, we actually really know about from interfaces from the programming world. What do actually we mean by the interface is actually, you have a one bigger umbrella and the functionality is actually divided into the differently, meaning you have a definition at the top and the implementation in the down layer. So what in this term people refer to as, because a platform, they might be see the same way. Like this is a platform, definition is in the platform, but the implementation is the outside of the third-party tooling. Like if the platform is actually is built in for the governance and policy management, its meaning is not doing by its own, but it's actually implementing via third-party tooling. That's one of the feeling people might got from the interface. Rather than interoperability mean that the platform is actually capable of interacting with third-party tooling, and that's a different context to it for both the conversation.
cool. Yeah, I think captured to be thought about, definitely. So thank you again, Josh. Like when I say, does anyone have any concerns with the direction of travel? It's not in an attempt to make nobody say anything. It's genuinely an attempt to get people to raise these bigger questions. So thank you, Josh, for raising that. Are there any other questions people have around the direction of travel for this row? Obviously, there's no final word for this yet. And the 4 boxes are kind of thrown completely up in air if this becomes 2 rows or merges with that last row or whatever. But the direction of travel of the conversation around there being a way in which users consume capabilities, and as well as a level of knowledge they must have to be successful with consuming those capabilities. That's sort of what we're trying to tackle here. What concerns, if any, do people have about direction of travel? John?
Yeah, so I apologize for the integration part was kind of what I said at first. That is actually what I was kind of talking about, and then I just added a comment that's more of like the user experience side of things as I see them for discussion
Cool.
later.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that context. I appreciate that. Cool. I give another minute silence in case, well, not full minute. No one can sit for a full minute silence. It's just awkward. Colin, what's up?
Hey, I missed it. I was on a phone call.
You came off mute, so I didn't know if you I was saying we're sort of looking, we're gonna wrap up this row. Even though we know we're not at final words, we're sort of at like, are we happy with the direction of travel, which is a conversation around how people interact with your platform and how much knowledge they have to be successful with your platform, and some combination of those. And we're still trying to figure out if we're going to split those or keep them together. But that's what we're trying to capture here. Cool.
Good on it.
Awesome. So then I'm going to suggest we go to the next one, and I'm going to be optimistic with my 8-minute timer again once I describe it. This one is all about how changes get suggested, introduced, tracked within your offerings. So how much of like the delivery timeline is, how is a delivery timeline identified, tracked, influenced, etc.? Does that make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, this is the time to say that makes no sense. But that was, I think, the intention behind this row. So so we're on this row that right now has backlog or roadmap as to possible titles. What do people think?
Abby, I had some comments in the evolutionary one that actually kind of apply to the whole row. I didn't know if you could. Yeah, okay. I didn't know if those would help too.
Ooh, I like the word responsive. Okay, so another take is reactive, responsive, proactive / strategic, and PAS, PAP. So out of necessity versus requests that can be anticipated and fulfilled, and being kind of adding capabilities to facilitate engagement enhancements, and then active role to influence and consumption of new capabilities. Cool. That feels sort of aligned with the like direction of travel, though I do really like some of the word suggestions. Is there anything I'm missing in there that where you're feeling like it is not just word improvements, but actually a change in intention that you were actually proposing?
Yeah, I think the core of it for me was around that anticipation and taking like a deliberate approach to platform development there to a degree. It's like the reactive part was this thing was created because we needed better tools, and it was created out of necessity. And then we've kind of formalized as far as investment, so we kind of formalized that we've got a little bit of a thing going, and we've got some platform strategy. And so our teams are asking us for tools and things, and we're starting to develop what our platform is. We're starting to improve some things. But the evolutionary piece for me was like that turn to this is proactivity. We got a full-time team, or at least a strategy, and we are finding new ways to provide tools to our developers, right? So we're trying to kind of turn that corner where it's not just like the IT is responding to a request from the developers. Now it is more, let's give our folks better tools and develop some new things and improve the platform.
Thanks for the clarity. Robert, what's up?
When I'm looking through these and with the wording suggestions from Colin and with what you just said, literally, I feel that like the headline for this one could potentially be strategy, because it is like, do you have a strategy? Are you just reacting to what people want? Is that the strategy? Are you actually setting off saying that we need to make like what is the strategy? And that might not be necessarily the correct word, but at least I feel that kind of makes sense in this conversation, that this is about the strategy for creating a platform or not, and how you're supposed to do that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I like that. And it feels like in the early stages, you're much more tactical. Your strategy has not emerged yet, and that feels like you're on the spectrum. But Robert's comment goes to something that I've been wrestling with as we've been talking, which is, why so many rows? Are these the right rows? Like, to me, I think I've started to wrap my head around what the levels are. So the vertical slices, but the horizontal slices, what are they? What is each of these things? I think, in some ways, one way to look at this is what sort of visible, what things could you see that would help you understand where you are in this matrix? But another is, what are the organizing principles around how they group these things together? And so I don't think we're going to figure it out today, but it feels like we have too many rows, because I think we're mixing things. We haven't arrived at the principles that divide this up yet. That's not a huge criticism. It's just like, we still work to do. Good news.
Yeah, that
Exactly.
was there. A couple of us were in the thing last week, in the doc last week, and I think like Josh, you added a couple rows and stuff too. And it was, as we were chatting about that stuff, it was clear that there's some bleed over into some of the new rows, and then some got deleted and some got created and some got deleted. I think it's a good thing that we're kind of going through that exercise. There's definitely stuff that gets discovered, like investment. I think we moved some things into investment that is represented by some of the rows down further just through this call. I think it's great.
Oh, you say that, and now I don't understand. So what's the difference between rows 3 and 4 then?
That's this one and this one. So I think the things we were thinking about in row 3 was, and this is not definitive. This is like, well, what my summary, my understanding of the conversation is that row 3 is around the consumer's viewpoint. So how does the person who's consuming it think about how they consume it? Versus row 4 is more about the producer's viewpoint. How do you produce the thing? How do you track the work you want to do to produce it? Like, how do you gain input into what you want to produce next?
Okay.
That's totally off the cuff. I'm seeing a lot of nods, so I must not have been talking total and utter crap. Sorry, go before I talk more crap.
You're good. Yeah, I think this is, I appreciate, I think, us kind of talking about the general concepts of like the rows and how they kind of form together. I think talking about the row at hand, I guess, with backlog and roadmaps. I think how that's definitely different than the last one is that, like, I think there's a difference between like interactions between the platform and its users and like work actually getting prioritized. Like, what should the platform actually accomplish? And so that's where I think, going back to sort of these columns, I like, I forgot who suggested it. I think it was Colin. No, it was someone, but they were talking about kind of having strategy sort of be the focus of number 3. And I think even with strategy, and we're talking about like roadmaps and backlog, it shouldn't just be somebody is asking for this functionality, let's just go do it. There should be some type of like alignment with the group or organization's overall goals. And so I think that's at least a pattern of maturity, is like having sort of like there's alignment. Like, I'm not just having to guess what requirements or requests should come first. There should be like, as a group, we know what's important, what's going on, and it aligns with the platform's backlog and roadmaps as well.
So just a quick note for a refresher for folks, the Cloud Native Maturity Model does a decent job. I know they're reworking the way that they format and stuff like that too, but their horizontals are essentially people, process, policy, technology, and business outcomes. And so the way that they're kind of grouping that does make sense for the different outcomes you expect from different functional groups and things there, but just a kind of a refresher on that, just in case it helps.
I think that jives well with, I think it was something Kirsten said last time we met, was around like, I try and think about who cares about each row. If somebody said that, made that astute realization. I think that idea of like, what defines a row? Is it a combination of who cares and whatever else? It might have been you, Marcia, said that, I don't know, but yeah, like, I think that getting clarity on what defines a row, like what is the characteristics of a row, will help us figure out how to clarify the rows, I think.
So like Abby, like I think like I just understood like the row number 4 is actually telling consumers about the roadmap, about the stuff or the product is actually in the pipeline, or how they eventually, like, there's 2 things to look at it. The row 3 is for the consumer perspective of using the platform, and row 4 is for the producer, and it's telling them the correct way or the obvious ladder to follow to add services for the platform. So that is actually, I think, the goal here, according to the understanding of mine. So I think right now there's the terms backlog, roadmap, and strategy is a bit weary for the conversation around producer, because sometimes people, I look at the articles I read it, when they're often talking about the for the roadmap, they're talking about vision and goals. They're talking about committed to excellence, support and resources, and flexibility, adaptability. And those are the words. And now we can't add so many of these words in here, but the backlog, roadmap, these 2 words is too vague, because they've been used in too many other places. Like for the open source projects, people use roadmap and backlog as well. So might be for the producers, it's very difficult to understand from these words. So we have to be more generic in terms of field. And then there's a reactive and tactical and responsive. And in the 3rd category, we see proactive, strategic, and evolutionary. I think the term committed to excellence can be fit, and they actually overlapping with these words, but it's very more generic than to this. So I think right now this is the row 4 is actually need to have more investment, and we need to we have to research more on this topic, because currently, if you not tell me this is the row 4's goal, I couldn't understand what exactly we're talking about here.
I was a PM, and maybe that's the difference. Like this was one of the harder parts of my job, is managing incoming requests and backlog. I'll be quiet now. Saki, I see you have your hand up. So
No, I just wanted to call out what Abby just added, where we were commenting off and on a couple of weeks ago about the product mindset, which is in the way I read it is exactly what this road is about, what this row is about. And I can share, like, from a lot of organization I've seen, it's really shifted from the reactive tactical side, or even the I know best kind of thing. Like, I would tell you how to use how you should use a platform and why I build it the way I build it. Where where if you compare all the like towards the other end, the platform as a product is, now I listen to you, the consumers, and I'm building stuff, I'm building things, services, pave paths that really designed to help you deliver your job. So, and being on both sides of the equation, this is really what makes the difference between product mindset and which eventually creates the backlog, a roadmap, and a strategy, right? Like this is the output of building products.
Sorry. Sorry, I just wanted to just read out, I guess, what I just put in the chat. So a platform team can streamline the cognitive workload to improve user experience. So this is from a user perspective, and then strategize the product roadmap to make a solid platform. So streamlining and strategy probably will work.
I think another option is to, like, another way to read it is to read it from the team topologies book, where they're talking about the 4 different kind of teams, and then towards the end they also recognize that the platform team wears 2 hats, where the second one is a streamline team delivering features and values to the organization. Their consumers, their customers are internal, but it doesn't mean that they don't have customers.
In some ways, I wonder if they'll change on V2 of their book, in some of these things. But so, Robert, I see your hand raised. I want you to have time, but then everyone else be thinking. We're at a point where I'd like to ask the question of, where are people uncomfortable with the direction of travel for this row? Right. So again, I know that we don't have a word yet. We've got product mindset, we've got strategy, we've got conversations about which one is maybe superior to the, not superior, but like inclusive of the other, or a driver of the other versus directions. So yes, Robert, go, and everyone else be thinking, is there anything that you're uncomfortable with on the kind of direction of travel?
Yep. So I just wanted to point out that the more people are speaking about this, the more people are not internalizing, but contemplating and vocalizing what their thoughts are. It's really hard for me to hear anything other than this is the strategy. It's really hard for me to see how this can be anything than strategy, because it's literally that a backlog, roadmap, these are tools that you use to achieve your strategy. It kind of just makes sense that this is a strategy thing. Just wanted to say that.
I am very comfortable. My personal opinion is I'm very comfortable removing backlog and roadmap as the current title options. I wanted to capture the idea in here of product mindset, which we now have as a separate option. So I feel like the comment thread is no longer bringing anything additional. I do think strategy and product mindset, there's still some open questions there, and I want to leave space for those conversations and for that to percolate. But I feel like I'm hearing quite strongly from people that backlogs and roadmaps are examples of tools, versus product mindset and strategy are arguably higher level. We don't know which one yet is the right one. So I'm getting some nods. So this is where I asked, is anyone upset if I remove those? Pretty sure I came up with them, so I feel very comfortable removing them. But if anyone else thinks they're smart, then
I like including them in the other verticals, like in the levels.
Yes. Cool. So I'm going to delete those two and leave strategy and product mindset for now. So the question on the table now is, where are people, if anywhere, concerned about the direction of travel for this thread, for this horizontal?
Very quickly, I think my only concern is it doesn't feel clear to me when we're thinking about strategy or product mindset. Are we thinking about just from like a shared just platform point of view of like how we want to add to the platform? I heard kind of crosstalk about like how do we take on work for the like the products that are relying on the platform? Are we just all of them together, like producers, consumers, or just the roadmap entirely? I think that's kind of what it's coming down to. Or the strategy as a whole.
Oh, I found my who comment. This was not me. Someone smarter than me said this, and I, as you can tell, I'm taking my notes for people. It was in the description, so they'd be making clear the who is. I knew it. See, this is why I type so much. We'll come back around to everything eventually. Sorry, I want to include what you were saying, and what you're saying there is like, what does this incorporate? Is it like it? Sorry.
Yeah, who's the
let me
target
summarize
of
that.
this strategy? Who's the strategy targeting? And it may be like more broad of like it's targeting all parties involved. I think that's where we're more so leaning towards. But yeah, I think it's just unclear to me like who this is meant for.
I dropped in the graphic just for fun because it also came up. Someone mentioned earlier skateboard to car, right? To me, that reflects these 1 to 4 stages, right? Like at each of these times, it's a product that's solving it's addressing some user journey, and it's just like if you try to go straight to car, you will fail, right? And so how are you going to evolve through these different stages? And each of those requires having a product mindset so that you meet the needs of your, I don't know, ambition or your teams at each stage. And so I agree that this is kind of a product mindset. I think it's about, realizing your purpose as a platform. Strategy also works. I don't know yet what the right label is for this, but I feel like we're at least triangulating on some concepts.
But wouldn't adopting a product mindset be a strategy?
I think it might be a necessity.
I would agree, but
yeah.
But I think you would have to get to that and set that as the direction that you want to go in.
The reality is there's a lot of words and a lot of inputs going into this, and I'm really glad it's recorded so that we have the chance to like rehear in people's own words what they were thinking when they were making suggestions, right? Versus like what I happen to manage to type fast enough to try and capture in the right spot. But like, I think what we're going to end up with is an attempt to try and boil down the row to a word. We're going to have to pick a word and a description. This like kind of one sentence, what are we trying to capture here? And then revisit it again. And there's going to have to be that attempt to kind of like diverge and converge. And like, this is our divergence. Like, we're trying to capture how are people thinking and what are people thinking? And then we're going to have to go, okay, how do we capture all that into something that is capturable on this table, knowing that it will be imperfect. And that's why we're going to have the paragraphs down below that are going to talk about that nuance and are going to bring in those ideas of like the actions that you do and those kinds of things. So yes, cool. What other concerns do people have around direction of travel for this one before we move on to the next row? Marsha, I'm going to capture those categories in the thing up here, which is sort of on what Colin was saying. So like, if we go more like the CNMM, so the Cloud Native Maturity Model, then maybe.
Yeah, I often hear people talking about people processing technology, but that feels like it's missing things like culture, organization, and product itself. And so I was just wondering, like, if we go back to rethink, how would we group these rows?
No, I think it's great. And like, I think that if we end up publishing a maturity model that has none of the original rows, because what those original conversations drove was a better like domain grouping of things, that will be a humongous success of the working group, right? So like
Agreed.
the value of having concrete things is that we can challenge them. And so thank you, Josh. That people like, I think that the first version of this paper was quite concrete, which is what has created fairly strong reactions from people, which is going to allow us to drive a better domain modeling of this, right? And so I think this is all part of the journey, in my opinion. So this is all really good. All right. I haven't given any space, so I'm going to give now 5 seconds. If anyone has any reason why they feel like they're uncomfortable with the direction of travel of this one, obviously you'll be uncomfortable with some of the words, but the direction of travel, please do share so we can capture that. Okay, then again, please continue to raise them as it happens, but I'll move on for now. So the next row is again, I'm going to talk about what the intention is more than what the words say, because the words have shifted from the original wording. But I think the intention is it's all in an attempt to capture that intention. The intention being about how, and I think actually, Marsh, you brought this up earlier today, this idea of like, there is how the team works, and then there is how the environment around the team supports success of that team, right? So when you think about like career development of an individual, you think about like a junior dev is all about making themselves effective. Then you kind of get to a team level of effectiveness, then maybe an department level, then maybe an org level, and then maybe industry wide, right? And that's sort of one way you can look at the maturity of a individual contributor over time. This is trying to bring to the forefront the fact that for a mission of supporting an internal set of capabilities via platforms or otherwise, how your organization interacts with you and interacts with that internal thing, like how it's organized, matters. My blabbering attempt not to use all the words in that row is complete. Robert, what's up?
I'm not 100% sure about the wording and the title in itself and what's and what a better position would be. But when I look at what we have and where we're at right now, and then seeing past that to the next 2 rows, I feel that the 2 next rows are kind of redundant at this point. I think at that point we captured everything.
These 2 you're saying, just so I know what
yes.
you're talking about. Okay.
Again, because I think it is hard to define something like cross-functional representation, if not, again, it's something that I feel that it doesn't necessarily have to be in this type of maturity model, because that could mean a lot of things in different scenarios. And the integration part, again, I feel is kind of in the user experience, which we mentioned before. So I feel that if we have investment, the adoption, the strategy, user experience, and now potentially an organizational element that shows as to what do we as a community feel that is kind of like the highest level of structure, organizational structure that makes sense for platform development. I think we have basically the maturity model, like essentially, it's and I feel that it's going to be a little bit hard with wording here, because like technical team topology. If you just say team topology, you're going to specifically reference a book.
That
at some point.
That's captured somewhere as well,
yeah.
right? So yeah, these are still work in progress names, but I appreciate that that's another vote for that being, probably not the direction we want to go. But yeah.
And organizational structure also feels it's a little bit too heavy.
Mm.
But it's more descriptive than technical team topology. Because like I said, at that point, we're basically just referencing a book or a wording that came from a book.
Structure, topology change, and structure change is all about corporate realignment. So maybe alignment.
I like alignment a lot more. Again, if we're trying to, and I see a hand up, I'm not going to talk that much. I'm going to try to be quick about it. If we come back again to the GitOps principles, it is we try to have like a very concrete word for each principle, and then filled it out with a little bit of flavor text, but still not a long. It's an easy to read sentence. If we think investment, adoption, user experience, strategy, alignment, that started to sound like something very specific you could reference, right? So I like the word alignment a lot.
Yeah, I think just to be clear, that is our intention to get there. It's the table currently contains a lot more information because it's us trying to capture. We don't yet have it's that old saying of like, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. It's like that. Like right now we're not yet at a point where we can go to one word in all the categories because we don't yet have that alignment of what we're trying to get across, and therefore that like deep dive onto that one word. But yes, 100%, just reiterating, that is absolutely where we're going to get to, or where I suspect we are traveling. I intend to travel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
go
go
for it.
next. Yeah. I remember. I don't remember I had this conflict in my mind the first time I read it. Like I read the whole doc, the draft. But now this row, the alignment one, and the user experience interface, all these kind of things, like has some overlapping, at least in my view, because the way I see, like if you think about user experience or documenting, and then on this side let's leave aside the word that we want to give for this section. What we're calling out, the progression of how platform expose their services, it's kind of read the same. Maybe I'm completely off, but there's no one-to-one mapping, but it feels somewhat related. So I wonder if others see the same and whether we should combine those two together, or
I do think you're bringing up a good point of user onboarding and documentation. We've been trying to do a bit of a culling of like, we don't want activities to be the like header word or like something you might produce to be like the header word. So I think those are maybe we got better about that as time went on. So I think, in my opinion, user onboarding and documentation are things that would be addressed within the squares, like within the like row columns, I meant, not a header for the whole row. And so that doesn't reduce the question you're asking, just to be clear. I hear that there's a question of, does that entire row overlap with the row we're talking about right now? But
not
you've called
completely,
attention
but
to it.
maybe, yeah, not completely, but just thinking whether we can, because devs doing ops or ops as a service, then pave path sounds kind of similar to me.
I'm going to remove those two.
I think I understand where you're coming from, but if you start thinking in the lines of user experience being the potential experience of a developer or your consumer of the platform trying to do something, which is something that will be affected by how much adoption you have and how many are using it, and strategy, like all these kind of tied together in some aspects. But if we try to distill what is the user experience of using this platform versus how is the organization around, or how is your organization set up for consuming a platform or not consume a platform? Like, who is responsible for what part, how much should be in the platform, so on and so forth. If you, again, just to kind of like put this into perspective in form of what's happening in the world, it is, are you, when you're using a platform like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, you're not responsible for the machines there, you're responsible for the usage. How can you then create a platform for your developers to not be responsible for how stuff is running, but just how are you using the platform? That's kind of like, again, the same, like that type of maturity model. Like if you put into perspective that the public cloud providers are a very mature platform service, and you want to make it easier for your developers, that is kind of the same direction you're going in, right?
But you basically called out, and I think like this is, if I extract one word from your answer, is responsibility. And I'm coming from AWS, and we have the shared. I'm not saying like we shouldn't use that, but the shared responsibility model explicitly calls out what's on me as a platform and what's on you as a consumer.
Yes.
And there's a contract which both of you, like both of us agree as the provider and the consumer, like this is the contract. You can't complain to me if you open your firewall to the world and having DDoS attack.
Yes, and I think that might be something to take into consideration when we're trying to figure out what to call this type of level. You have different sets of responsibilities the further down the maturity level you go, to the point where your consumer literally is only responsible for the the business value added, like the thing they're supposed to be doing for to get stuff, to get money. Literally.
I think it's about their access. So just to add to this, I think the responsibility matrix I found extremely interesting, and actually put together a really crappy emoji filled version of that for a conference talk a few months ago, because I was like, every platform team should be creating a responsibility matrix with their like for their own platform of like what it is, and like look at the platforms we rely on, the cloud providers, right? So I think that is a activity and a resource that is like hugely valuable in the space that we're in. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that is like a tenet of being a platform, is that you can tell people what you own and what I own. And this is where, when I think Robert was saying earlier, he was confused by templates being more mature than APIs. Pretty sure that was a shift just out from under. I didn't notice it, because I would have been on the same page as you of like, I would have asked the same questions, because with a template, who owns the thing you're creating from that template? Who owns the updating of that template? Like, you forked that code, so you own it because it's your fork. Like, I don't know. And so with an API, there's a clear contract there, or there's the potential for a clear contract. But if you have leaky abstractions, and if you like don't make it clear what people are responsible for, then like it's just no better than a template, right? It could be no better.
As a summary, I really like, I don't know if this is what you meant, Robert, but like responsibility and how the responsibility gradually shift from you build it to run it. You just call it out here, and it's like in every second LinkedIn post out there. Do I have? Does it really mean I build it, I run it, or there's some high level of abstractions that I build it, I run it, I have the tooling to run it, but if something fails on the back end of it, I can still have
an escalation path.
Escalation path, service support, all the other things that we know from the things you consume on a day-to-day basis. Not even platform. Let's talk about consumer platform on our cell phones.
I would say that the responsibility matrix and the things that you're mentioning now would again be a doing thing. Like if you get to a certain level of maturity, you should probably have a responsibility model. I don't think this particular line is about responsibility, but it comes very much into it when as you mature. In the start, it's basically the Wild West. Who's responsible for what? We have no idea because everyone just are arguing about that. That's
that's basically you're basically saying this, unless I'm not getting it, but you're basically saying what, like, as you mature, as you gradually mature, you're reaching to a phase where you have a maturity model. Like this is what you said, and
yeah,
and so the first phase, the peach color one, can be the Wild West phase where everything goes, whereas the purple one is there's a real contract definition.
Yes,
model,
and I would
for
say
responsibility.
And I would say that the further to the left you are on the model, the harder it is to define who is responsible for what. And the more mature you become, the more sense it makes. Like at some point, it just makes sense what Microsoft, Amazon, or Google is responsible for when you're deploying your stuff on their platform. Because it is a platform as a service. So you put in your things, you have to protect your data. Besides that, they're taking care of the rest. If you're doing the infrastructure, as a service part, you have more responsibility that's shifted towards you. I think this kind of reflects that as well. So on the right side, it's very easy, or much easier, to say this team is responsible for this part of the system, while on the left side, it's basically Wild West. Like people are gonna blame each other for everything. Getting flashbacks to previous jobs.
So
I just wonder.
So it really shifts if we like, it's just me and Robert like talking now. But if this is gonna be the progression of this role, then it's not totally about team structure. It's more about team interactions.
Yes, absolutely.
And team interactions, team constructs, team topologies, even call them wisely team APIs. Like, it's already like naming things. So
yeah, absolutely. So let's Abby, and like I think like I'm actually agreed with what how Sai, I think is you correctly named to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's Sahi. It's a Hebrew name, but Sahi is okay.
Okay. So I'm actually totally agree with what Sai said. It's more oriented toward team interaction. It's not about structuring, because the reason is that I'm actually from the debate is, let's say you are the producer of the platform and I want to purchase your platform. And then I made a team that is actually interacting with the platform, and they have their needs that is actually solving. So if we're talking about the organization structure, if the company I'm actually happen to work with, we're selling the platform for the enterprises, and the enterprise has their developers, their customers. And once you actually bought the platform, then a platform is actually eventually grows in time. Let's say today you have policy engines, tomorrow you add service meshes, later you add GitOps and monitoring observability. Let's say you take it down the road. Now the question is, if you're adding services to your platform, how you actually, and the people are actually looking for the feedback, how the team is actually structured so they can actually taking the need from the platform. But currently, the row is actually telling up the interaction. And what Sai said, if we need to tell from the matrix, that's tell us the organization structure, we need to pretty much align the responsibility model. And I think the terms start with the responsibility model, and then it's eventually expanding. When the platform grows, how the platform eventually looks with the responsibility model. And as the Robert mentioned, like the further you left are, the responsibilities are vague, and further you right are responsibilities and the structuring alignment. So I think for the next 2 rows, it's better to have one row that's talk about the organization structure, and the one we're actually talking about is the organization communication, you can call it, or the interaction, we can call it.
I think that's really interesting. I think that there are, so I really enjoy the direction this is going right now, where we are doing I think the group is doing a really good job of sussing out where like buzzwords and like techniques or whatever have like snuck into generic titles of things. And I think that this one is an example of that. And I think that like responsibility matrix thing and what you're talking about, Saeem, and what you talked about, Sahi and Robert, like are good examples of where we've kind of sussed out, like, this isn't about dev versus ops and is DevOps dead? And no. This is about like, you know, what is that relationship between these things? So I do want to, we have 8 minutes left. And I do want to, because I've heard a couple people be like, oh, it sounds like this cross-functional representation. I feel quite comfortable that integration, the final one, we don't need to talk about, because Josh, as the author of that, was like, that falls into what we were talking about up with user experience. So I'm comfortable moving that to another conversation if we want to keep talking about it. But cross-functional representation, I think, has been looked at as redundant a few times. And I just want to make sure the intention is there, and it can still be considered redundant, but I don't know if the intention I've heard in why other people think is redundant. The intention here is that there's a lot of pressure on the producers of capabilities, the producers of these platform offerings, internal offerings, to basically like do everything. And like, there's a lot of conversation of like, are platform engineers infrastructure engineers, or should platform engineers be building on top of what other infrastructure engineers are providing in the way of virtual machines and Kubernetes clusters and whatever? Like, should one team own the creation of the infrastructure and the like productizing of access to that infrastructure by internal teams? And I think that the cross-functional representation, this row, quite possibly very poorly described, the intention of it is to say that there is a there is not an what is the expectation on the creators of these internal experiences, these internal capabilities, to manage all complexities, to manage the security requirements, the performance requirements, the auditing requirements, the infrastructure requirements? Like, do they have to become experts and implementers of all of these policies and requirements, or is part of their role to create essentially a second class of users for their platforms, which is a way in which they can enable non-software engineers to apply their specialties to the consumers of the platform, right? So you actually have this like marketplace essentially of a platform. And
Yeah,
that's what the intention of it was. But
I think the things you're saying now fits into the platform as a product strategy. That is, I feel that is part of that strategy. Not necessarily something that has a least or most mature level. I think that it's you need to get to that point to be at the top of the scale of maturity for strategy. You need to again, you don't necessarily have to have security. It would help, but you don't necessarily, depending on the company, again, organization, you don't necessarily have to have someone that's specifically in like information security or something like that. But you should be able to get in that input from the people who are responsible for that, and make sure that on a technical level, that is taken care of, so it's easy for the company to use your platform in a safe manner, as fitted by whoever is in charge of security. Which is again why I kind of feel like the two last rows are redundant, because they fit into some of the other levels in the different strategies.
I wonder if this is also where cross-functional could fit in, right? So as you say, it's redundant not by a single row, but by being incorporated at certain levels of the other rows.
I think we could. I think if the every row before that makes sense as a grand category, whatever you want to call it. And then like cross-functional representation feels like a sub maturity level, like maybe
point.
that kind of fits into several categories. It's not one of the main categories of becoming a mature, having a mature platform. It is some of the things you need to go through. And I feel that the way, again, the wording here when it comes to cross-functional representation, I don't know which one of these is more mature, because I feel that this kind of depends on the organization. So it's kind of hard to have a definitive starting at 1 going to number 4 on something like cross-functional representation, because I don't think that exists, to be honest. Like that is not something I would promote when I'm talking to a client about creating a platform team. You would have to think about how you're supposed to do that within within your organization. I don't think there's a better or worse way of doing it. So again, that's why I kind of come back to the like investment, adoption, streamlining, strategy, alignment, or team, organization structure, whatever. I think that is the maturity model in my head. And then we have the other two that I feel is actually like a subcategory in multiple of the others. It's hard to have that as its own category for me.
Yes, so my take is actually similar to the Robert one, but actually if you look at the third one, the third row, that's we're talking about the user or the customers of the platform interacting with the platform, and we are talking about their user experience. And I think we don't need a separate cross platform or the cross communication or anything, or rather we can actually add or actually encapsulate the same input in here, because that's where very important. We're telling for the platform maturity model how the user experience would look like. And somewhere we need to capture, like if we talk about interfaces for the third-party tooling, we're talking about friction reduction, cognitive load, when we talk about, I think, interoperability. So something I think added in here. If you can create a separate list, then this list is keep on growing. You're talking about cross platform or cross communication. Then there's a thing coming up like, are you talking about services, infrastructure, or not even you actually end up in tooling categories. So I think we don't need a separate row.
Yep.
We need a one column to be
And
added in that.
Yeah, so I've got that added now in 3 places, under the investment, under the user experience, and under the strategy, which I realize we don't have final words for those, but yeah, I think those are three examples for sure. So we're at the time for 2 hours, and so I'm sure everyone needs a bit of a leg stretch and a brain relax. But I super appreciate everyone who's spent any amount of time on this call, let alone the people who have been the troopers for the full 2 hours with me. I appreciate that wildly. My thought is that I'm going to leave the space open right now if anyone does have the time to, again, raise any concerns with the direction of travel. But it feels like we've done a really good job of like kind of diverging with lots of words and lots of conversation. And we sort of need to create another straw man that says, like, did this capture what people were saying? How did it not? What can we do with it? So what I'm thinking I might do next, and people can tell me this is a terrible idea and I will listen, is not edit this directly, but create like either a Google Sheets or another document with a straw man replacement table that we could use to have the next conversation, and have that be my best possible attempt at capturing what people were saying here today. And it may look wildly different, right? Like we talked about, maybe the things down the sides should be like the very high level organization technology process, right? Like, so this could be wildly different, or it could be fairly the same, but just kind of wordsmithing. I have no idea yet. My brain needs time to think through all of this really good information. If anyone would like to do that, try their own hand at that, huge suggestion that you do. And again, I think what we're trying to get to now is like, this has been a information gathering session, but the only way we can really determine if we are hearing the same thing that people are saying, like actually shared understanding here, is if we put new words in front of people with concrete ideas and challenge, did this capture your essence? Did this capture what you're targeting? So I will put this into the Slack channel as well, but I encourage anyone to take their attempt to, with the inputs from this call, create a like straw man model in a separate document. Please don't try and completely rewrite the table in this document. And then the next time that we find time to talk to each other again, hopefully maybe we can kind of put those up against, and if there's more than one, or if there's only one, that's cool. That'll be the thing that we can like hammer in on, change the words on, and improve. Does that sound good to people? Any reasons why that isn't a good way forward, or that we should try something different?
No, I think that's a very convenient approach to follow. I think makes a lot of sense, because some people have their different opinions on mine, and having all the information in the same place is difficult to read. I think it's having a copy in everyone's their Google Sheet or anywhere, their laptop. They can add those values in it, and then we can share with our internal branding. I think that's give us a lot, because right now the issue is that there's a lot of conversation happening, a lot of suggestion happening. It may feel like one place where we can actually becomes exploded with a lot of the information. So I think having a copy is more easier one. What I definitely do, what Abby said, like I will take a copy of it, and then I add some of the stuff in here. But I think we going forward, we should create a copy and then start adding input in there. And I think the left column should reflect all the challenges in the world is actually people are actually familiar with. All the left column, because people.
So all of that's up for, just to be clear, I'm not going to put rules around anybody at this point, other than I'm the only one with edit rights to this document, me and Josh, I think, and I'm not going to accept any suggestions that are like rewriting the whole table. That's the only place where I'm going to exert any level of authority, is that I'm not going to have anyone rewriting the table in this document. But what I might do is I might start up a Google Sheets, and I'll create a sheet and put my name on it, and if other people want to add a sheet, and that be like open editable, and if people want to add a sheet, and that way it's just a spot for each individual person to think through how would they do it, and then we can possibly create sort of like a gallery of them essentially, and be able to maybe grab from there to again, what we're trying to get to is we've been diverging. How do we converge on something that is closer to what we want to actually publish, even if it's still needs a bit of molding. So
I think all of these ideas are good. I also would kind of suggest that we try to, in the same fashion as you would kind of do blind reviews of presentations during a CFP review type thing, where so that you don't necessarily, if everyone's starting to do this in the same sheet, different pages, you are bound to start looking at what other people are doing, and that kind of shift your ideas. And that might be good. But at the same time, if you can do it like just based on what your opinion is, I would try to just like sit down and make this is the maturity models as I see it. Yep. And then when you start compare it would be very obvious. These are the things that everyone agrees with.
Yep.
Not just because they get swayed by someone else's opinion. I think
so. Yeah, we can create maybe like a Google Drive like directory and let people and say there's basically a deadline of dropping something in there, for not a deadline forever, but a deadline for the next call. do we feel like that's something that we want to like? So this is the type of thing where if you give it, it's like it's water, it will fill the cup, right? If we give it a month, people will spend 29 days doing nothing and then try and do something on the 30th day to submit it. Okay, maybe I'm speaking from my own experience, but like, so what do we think is a reasonable amount of time, given that it's not an easy task, but it's also not that we're asking someone to create the thing that's going to be published. It's more like, how do you capture what you care most about in a model that we can compare? Is that a week? Is that 2 weeks? Is that a month? How do people feel?
I like quoting laws. So Parkinson's law, the time that you allude to it is what it's going to take. So I feel we just set a date which makes sense, like a cadence that makes sense, and then just say you have until that point, I guess.
Cool. So a couple weeks doesn't feel like that would be absolutely oppressive. The one thing I'm looking at is I'm out of country in 2 weeks. So if we want to set a cadence of every other week, a fortnightly, I don't know if I'd be running a call from my holiday. So it may either be slightly shorter or slightly longer than fortnightly. So
I feel personally, and again, I only speak for myself, that if we're doing this type of work, having it getting paced out too much might mean that people will start falling off and not being able to, do like it. This is kind of like for me, it's more of a sprint thing. Like I would like this to be done quicker, more than like pacing it out and giving people a lot of room to think. I think a lot of people have been in here and have contributed a lot. There's always going to be room for people to protest if something all of a sudden goes in the wrong direction, because nothing is going to get published until it's put out there. So I would rather have not 2 weeks between calls. I would rather have something like a week or something, just to kind of start hammering it out.
cool. Then I will come up with a plan based on all of this amazing feedback, and I will put it in Slack so that anybody who wasn't here still has a chance to participate. And obviously people have had to leave, rightfully so, after 2 hours. So all of that makes sense to me, Robert. And we just have to try, right? If it turns out that we set the timing wrong, as in it's too fast and people can't get it done, we move it. And if it's too slow and we start losing people, we have to figure out how to regain them, right? So it's just one of those, like, we'll give it a shot. So I will come up with a plan and get it into Slack. But it will include basically a attempt to enable like a blind review of people's final drafts post all of this input, so that we can give people the chance to test how aligned are we on what we're trying to achieve, and more clearly identify where there are still things we need to discuss and things we need to align on, which I think is the outcome we're hoping for. So
just a small feedback I can tell you, Abby. Like I think like usually like I think the best is in terms of the date. Like if you tell people like from after 2 weeks or after 1 week, we have to publish this one thing, or we have to present this one thing in somewhere, then people might push it up. And if you tell people like we have 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but the final outcome is not presented anywhere, then might people not be interested in AI. So we need to find ways to showcasing.
Yeah, I agree. And that'll be a part of the proposed plan that everyone can torch when I put it up on Slack shortly. But no, thank you all. Really appreciate this is for everyone who's still here, appreciate it, and everyone who hopefully will follow up on and finish off the video that had to head out. This has been absolutely awesome. It's what I was hoping to achieve with this conversation. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how we now converge, right? Because I think we're starting to understand where we're trying to get to conceptually, but how do we converge on specific words? So amazing. I hope you all have a good rest of the day.
Yeah,
bye.
you too. Deal. Bye.